G'day legends, it's Mark here from North Oz, and in today's video I finally get to install something that I've had my eye on for a couple of years and I just never got around to installing in my last couple of builds. So it's going to be a great day. I'm really looking forward to sharing this with you guys, so let's get stuck into it now. So that's right guys, today I am installing a UHF radio into my 79 Series Landcruiser, a much more permanent solution than what I have been using. If you guys have been watching my videos last year, especially my camping videos, you would have seen me use this quite a fair bit, especially my Cape York video, where I use this to go up and down to the Cape. Absolutely nothing wrong with it, and I do recommend you guys use these, but I'm really looking forward to having a more permanent solution, especially as I'm getting out and I will be doing my lap of Australia as well, having a more permanent solution that can reach a little bit further than just this little 2-watt here. Now, I feel like I shouldn't have to say this, guys, but in today's climate, I think it is important to mention that I'm not sponsored. If I am sponsored by anything in the future, I will definitely let you guys know. But I saved up my own money to purchase this, and that is a big reason why I just used the small UHF here. That's the reason why I used that in my last couple of builds, because I didn't want something so permanent and so expensive in those builds. But now I will be taking this car around the country a lot more, and I am getting a lot more remote with my travels, so it makes sense to have a lot more permanent solution in there. But I think it's kind of important for me to mention that I did save up and buy this with my own money, and there's a couple of reasons why. One of the main reasons is I just trust the product. You know, I've been using it for a little while now. A lot of the handheld stuff I've been using a lot. I used this 2-watt for a little while. I did have some issues on my mate's receiver, so the talking function, whatever it is, that button there, it kind of went on that, which made me realize once we went, that was when we were off to the Cape, that made me realize that we need to have at least a couple of UHFs handy, whether it's having a couple of portable ones or having a more permanent solution in one of the vehicles. So that is something that kind of jumped out to me, and something I learned from the Cape York video is that, and the trip that we did, was that having a good solid permanent solution in at least one of the cars and having a couple of portable radios handy is a big part of our trip and big part of the trip. So that is something that's really important. It's probably the biggest reason why I've gone out and spent the money, is because I feel like that this is a very important thing to stay in communication with the people around you, because a lot of the places I'm going don't have any mobile phone reception. Now, besides the fact that this actually has a 5-year warranty, which is a pretty big statement, considering that, you know, it is designed for off-road and Australian conditions. If I get 5 years out of this, I'm going to be pretty happy. But one of the main reasons as well that I purchased this particular unit was the fact that it does have a couple of features. I mean, I'm not going to use some of the things like the GPS, where I can see if I've got a mate or something, or someone in the convoy, or I'm communicating with someone who has one of these units. I can see where they are using GPS. I'm probably not going to use that. It's just one of those things that people say they're going to use, but let's face it, I'm not. But one of the things that I do appreciate about this is I can listen to the previous transmission. So that is something that I'm really looking forward to using on my next Cape trip coming up in 2024. So make sure you've subscribed so you don't miss that one. And that's something I'm really looking forward to, because a lot of these truckies, man, they're going like pretty quick, or they're going over the bumps and stuff. And it's really important to try to get past them safely. And I just couldn't hear what they were saying. And I just had no chance. Like, can you repeat that again? And I still couldn't hear it as well, because, you know, going down the corrugations, it's really, really loud. So having the repeat function is actually super, super handy. Now, something else that you kind of get with the bigger branded products like GME, it's stocked in a lot more places around Australia. So I just actually went down to my local auto barn and picked up a pass-through switch, which will allow me to basically unplug and plug this quickly and easily. So I don't have to have the unit, because this is just the handset. I don't have to actually have the unit somewhere accessible, like down near my knee, which is where I installed it in my D22 Navara. So I can actually tuck and install the whole receiver for this, like the actual head unit for this. I can tuck that right down and out of the way, and I'll just have a little pass-through switch sitting on top of the dash that I can plug into. That's just one of the accessories that you get with these. And the fact that, you know, it's Australian made company as well, that's something that I really appreciate, because as I've said before, I'm trying to get as much Australian made products on this vehicle as I can. Now, another reason why I went with this exact kit is because it comes with the 2.1 dBi antenna. I'm a big fan of low dBi antennas. I feel like that they do a lot more than the really tall high dBi antennas. So for those of you that don't know, there's people that have done a lot more research and know a lot more about it than I do regarding the dBis. But basically, the lower the dBi, the better it is in mountainous areas But I found from my testing that having the lower dBi actually does about the same in flat areas anyway. So for me, I do live around kind of mountainous areas anyway, but I found switching, I had like a little bit of an antenna that I was able to switch between low dBi and high dBi, and I did a lot of testing just myself, and I found that the low dBi worked a lot better. So that's something as well you might want to take into consideration when purchasing your own antennas for your own vehicles. But for me, this kit, it's like an Outback kit or four-wheel drive kit, and it comes with the XRS370, that's what this is here, and it also comes with a low dBi, 2.1 dBi antenna. So for those of you that are interested in what some of those numbers are, that gives you a bit of an idea as well. Also too, I don't believe that this system in total will draw more than 2 amps. So if you are looking at installing this into your vehicles, keep that in the back of your mind as well, that you're going to draw probably up to around 2 amps. The reason why I say that is because there is a fuse built in to the factory kind of receiver, the power leads running to the factory receiver, and that's got a 2 amp fuse on it. So I'd be surprised if it draws any more than a 1.5 or 1 amp. So for me installing this, I know that I can kind of tap into some sort of accessory wiring, knowing full well it's not going to draw too much power. But for me though, in the 79, I actually found that the USB charging is pretty terrible. So I'm just going to replace the USB charging in this vehicle with just the power to run to my UHF, and that way it's really close and really accessible for me to diagnose in case something does go wrong on one of my trips. So for those of you who wanted to know some of the basic specs, that's all that out of the way and the reasoning why I purchased this UHF. It's not just a simple purchase, it was something that I did think quite a lot about. So now I'm going to show you how to install it in your own vehicle. Most vehicles are pretty similar, but there are a couple little, maybe if you guys have a 79 of your own, there's a couple little tips that I'll show you guys here as well. But there's also a lot of tips that will help you guys get a super clean install into your own four-wheel drive. So let's get stuck into that now. Whenever working on the electrical system on my four-wheel drive, I always take the time to remove the terminals, negative terminal first, to ensure I don't cause any electrical problems while working on the truck. I have started mounting up the bracket and receiver unit in the center console, so I can start thinking about how I'm going to wire everything up. So I've started by first removing the liner of this center console, just so I could place the mount for my UHF, kind of like the main head unit sort of thing you want to call it, for the UHF, and that's just going to sit in there. So what I'm up to right now is I've just plugged in the wires. It's all just factory stuff that it's come with, and that's also the extension cable, because my plan is to run a kind of a pass through that's going to sit as a switch here on this blanking switch here. So that's going to be pretty good, and that means I can just plug and unplug that when I am going camping. So that's where I'm up to at the moment. So my next plan is to I need to set up the UHF Aerial, so I need to do that next, and I will also be running some of the wiring as well. So my plan is to run it down into the console and to meet up with this USB socket here. I actually don't use that USB socket. I'm going to put another one in here anyway, so I'm just going to tap into the power for that, which will be super easy. And then I'll also need to run the wiring for my pass through as well. So that's kind of where I'm up to, and yeah, we'll see how it all turns out. With the receiver unit mounted, it is time to mount the aerial and begin the process of running the coaxial cable from the aerial to receiver unit. I remove the bolt and crush washer off the cable so I can run the coaxial cable through the bull bar aerial mount. I was careful when pulling the coaxial cable through, as the cable can kink easily, so taking my time while working on the coaxial cable ensures it won't be damaged. The last time I installed UHF, I ran the coaxial cable along the outside of the bull bar tubing and cable tied it to the bar where it would run across a flat part of the bull bar and then finally into the grill. With this install, I drilled a hole around halfway between the aerial mount and the scrub bar so I can run the cable in the bar and follow the wiring of the fog light into the engine bay. I must say I was terrified to drill a hole into my brand new bull bar, but it is well worth it to keep the coaxial cable out of the way of rocks and other potential damage. Now, if you have basic tools like me, I started using a 3mm drill bit to drill the hole, but I noticed that the drill just really wasn't cutting through the steel very well. So I sprayed some lanolin Inox MX4 on the bit and it cut a lot easier. I then stepped the hole out to a 9mm drill bit so I can fit a grommet in the hole to protect the cable. While I'm working on this bull bar, can I ask you to take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video, because we currently have over 80% of people watching these videos that have not yet subscribed. I really enjoy making these videos for you guys and talking with you in the comment section. And thank you for subscribing, and thank you to all those who have been subscribed for quite some time now. I greatly appreciate it. Now let's make sure this bull bar doesn't rust after drilling into it. Using some roll bar spray paint, I repainted the exposed steel, as this will rust quickly in the tropical climate up here in Cairns. I pushed the grommet into the hole and started to wrap the coaxial cable in 6mm cable sheathing. In tight spots like through the bull bar and into the center console, I used a flexible sheathing. But when running the cable under the vehicle and into the engine bay, I use a more rigid and thicker conduit. This is due to the sheathing providing a tighter fit to the cable, which helps in narrow spots, and the thicker conduit is better suited to taking hits from rocks and providing more space around the cable. This is important to note, as running coaxial cables too closely to other wiring in your vehicle can cause interference, so a thicker conduit is better suited to the engine bay in my opinion, given the heat and potential for interference. This truck is so easy to work on that there is even tubes on each side of the factory grommet that allows you to run cabling through the firewall without having to touch any of the factory wiring loom. The benefit of this is that it will reduce the potential for interference, given it is further away from the main source of electrical current entering through the cabin. After cutting the end off the wiring grommet tube, I push the wire into the hole so I can pull the coaxial cable through into the cabin by taping it onto the wire and dragging it through the tube in the grommet. There was a bit of resistance the first time, so I sprayed a small amount of lanolin in the tube and it pulled through much easier. Yes! This is by far the easiest way to bring cables into the cabin that I have used so far. Next, I ran the cables under the vinyl floor and near the center console, ready to unbolt the center console and start organizing all the wiring to go into the receiver. I pulled the power cable through the front of the console and crimped some spade connectors onto the ends of the wires. I already had the female connectors on the factory wiring from the center console install video, so to get the power to the receiver unit, all I had to do was simply plug in the spade connector to the factory wiring loom for the USB sockets. I also use heat shrink to protect the connectors from touching each other when going down those rough dirt roads.
Johnny boy, put your hat back on. Now you're out there on your own. Johnny boy, you got a one-way.
With power to the unit sorted, I needed to run the cable that will power the handpiece. The easiest way to do this was to pry a factory blank switch out with a trim removal tool, connect the extension cable to the back of the pass-through switch, and feed the cable down into the dash. This made it much easier to get the cable through the dash and pull it down out of the bottom and into the center console, where I can plug it straight into the receiver. I then clipped the switch into place and pulled the coaxial lead into the center console. At this point, I finished pulling through the coaxial cable and plugged it into the receiver. That is all 3 wires all connected, so I cable tied them all together in a few spots along the loom to keep everything neat and organized before I bolted the center console back down. The final and most important step is to use Loctite to put the bolt and crush washer onto the UHF Aerial. The very first time I learned about Loctite was after installing the UHF on my Navara, and I took it for a test drive down a dirt road where the Aerial fell off twice in 3 kilometers of road. I ended up driving an hour with my Aerial dangling from the side of the bull bar. Needless to say, I drove straight to the hardware store to find the solution, which was this Loctite. If you're doing this install on a factory interior 79, I would recommend installing the unit into the glove compartment area, as there are various mounts that you can buy to allow the receiver unit to fit in that space quite easily without taking up any space in your glove box and other areas in the vehicle. I would also highly recommend buying the pass-through switch, doesn't matter how you mount the receiver up, as this makes the install so much neater. Now let me walk you around the installed UHF. Now, it's probably a little bit too hard to see what I was doing last night to be able to give you a really good idea of what this cabling is doing and the exact path. So I want to give you guys a few ideas, because there's nothing worse than someone saying, this is how you install it, they quickly rush through it and move on. So there's some of the ideas you might get as well, but this is kind of the exact kind of way that I followed the wiring to be able to get into the car. So this is a bit of a detailed walk around now of the wiring. So I started here with some sheathing, okay, and I did drill a hole like you guys saw, put the grommet in there too, and I've got the sheathing to go all the way into and down the length of the bar, because there is a bolt sitting here. So then that cable goes down here, it then connects up to and attaches to the cabling for the fog light. And I then followed that cable behind the grill. So you can see it down there. And you can see because it's a little bit smaller and a little bit shinier, because I changed to a conduit after the sheathing, because I trust a conduit a little bit more in the engine bay here, gives a little bit more protection. So then I've gone in behind that grill there, and all it does is spit it out at the bottom of the battery tray, which then I then use the battery tray hole to then mount the conduited cable onto that bracket. Then all I've done is gone around the battery, and it's gone around the battery under the fuel pump, and it's then connected up to the existing cabling there. You can see where I have zip tied it. And then I've avoided the non-conduited cabling and pipes to then pretty much go straight down into that grommet that you guys would have seen, where I just cut the piping. There's like a little bit of piping on each side of the main grommet, so that I could then run the coaxial going straight into the vehicle cabin. And now you guys would have seen that that's where it comes out here, and I still use the sheathing as I went into the interior of the vehicle, because the conduit does move around a little bit, so I like the sheathing, especially in the tight spaces. So I use the coaxial just sheathing, and that stuff that you guys have to get separately. So again, you get that from auto parts store and whatnot. So I ran that over the top, and I ran it around and behind this piping here. And that was a really cool little move there, because it means that it's not going to stick out much at all. And then I ran it then behind this carpeting, so you won't actually see that at all, which is pretty cool. And then it goes behind here and into the center console. So that, again, there's a little bracket here, which you can kind of maneuver that coaxial cable behind. And then it goes through here very easily and very simply into the back of the unit, which sits in there. So from there, I've also got the power cable, which just runs straight from the back of this unit all the way into what was powering this USB socket here. So again, super simple. And then we have the last one was just the pass-through cable. So still the pass-through cable sits in the front of it. So otherwise you would have to have the handset plugged into here, and it would be snaking out of this center console, which I really didn't want to do. So it looks a lot more cleaner now if we close that and we put that away, put that back in there. So if we close all that up, now that's how it looks, because that pass-through looks so much cleaner. Now, I ran, and this is what I found, is that if I put the clip in last, so I basically got the cable, instead of running the coaxial from the actual center console area into here, I found it very difficult to be able to find a route to get into behind that switch. So what I did was I started with the cable up here, pushed it down where it spattered out down the bottom, and then I was able to then, with a little bit of maneuvering, being able to run it down through the center console into the receiver. And then that's it. And then that's it all done. So that's how it looks now. I'm considering doing some sort of mounting, maybe here. I think that that would be probably the best spot that I've seen so far, that I've been able to come up with by myself anyway. So I might ask some of you guys where you've put yours. Let me know down in the comment section if there's a good spot. Up here isn't a bad spot either, but then, you know, you're not looking at flat surfaces. But for now, I'm quite happy with it being down there. And you guys now have a full idea of how to wire up your GME XRS unit into a 79 series or your own four-wheel drives. Now, before we get into the concluding segment of this video, how good does that interior look now? You got your center console there. You got the XRS unit coming out of the dash as well, which I love filling up those blank switches with extra switches. That's just a fun thing to do. Got the scan gauge there. And this is all Department of the Interior stuff here in the interior, and it looks so good. It's all fully matching, all grey vinyl, all the audio install done as well. So if you want to see videos on that, make sure you click the little cards that'll pop up at the end of this video. And I've also got some new one-stone armrests in there too. So that's pretty cool. The interior is looking fantastic. Probably doesn't look like much for those people who don't have 79s, but I tell you what, for those people that have 79s, I am very happy about that, and you guys would be too. And you can get a little bit of a sneak shot in there as well of the extra little storage that I got too. So if you want to see those videos, make sure you go and check them out. So last night I finished wrapping up the install of the UHF in the 79, and I must say everything went off without a hitch. I didn't find myself in a position where I had to frantically rush out and get things because it wasn't supplied in the kit. So that is something that I'm very appreciative of, is that the kit had everything I needed to be able to install it, except for the pass-through switch, which was something extra that I added that cost me $35. But again, I was able to go down to my local auto parts store and grab it specifically for the Toyota as well, so it fit up perfectly without having to, chop anything up and making it look ugly. So regarding the cabling and everything like that, the lengths are all fine. So I found that the length of the coaxial cable was perfect. If you're wanting to run a long pass-through cable, so that means that you want to have the switch in your dashboard or something, depending where you mount the UHF, the actual kind of head unit for it, I guess you'd call it, wherever you mount that may depend on how much length that you need. So just double check the length of that pass-through cable. But if you put it anywhere in the front half of the vehicle, you should be fine. And most people put them under the glove box, or in the glove box area compartment sort of spot there. So if you can get the UHF receiver in there, you're probably not going to have a problem with any of the lengths of the cabling. The only other thing that might kind of, stop you guys or maybe make it a little bit annoying is the length of the power cable going into the UHF receiver, into the main head unit, and that's because it's not particularly long. So if you want to run this like I did in my D22 Navara, where I had it hardwired onto the battery so I didn't have to turn the vehicle on to be able to use the UHF, if you're doing it that way, then you may need a little bit of extra wire to be able to extend it, and you also need to get some terminals as well, and either crimp or do some soldering as well to be able to get it onto the battery. So just a little little note there for you guys. If you want to hardwire it in, there is definitely a way to do that. It's not particularly difficult, and if you want to see how I did it, I'm sure I did the full install guide anyway, so I'll leave a little card at the end of this video for you guys to click on if you want to have a look at that, my very, very early videos. Now, there was one more thing I wanted to mention, is that there is another way, because that was something I really thought about, is how can I get power to the unit? I was a little bit worried about that. Now, if you don't want to sacrifice your USB cabling, your USB inputs, if you don't want to sacrifice that like I did, there is definitely a way that you can do it. And the other way that I was going to do it was actually from Explore Bound, where he did a fuse pass-through. So you can actually find an accessory, something that turns on, like your USBs or like any of the accessories that will turn on your head units, whatever it is, and you can actually get a USB pass-through. And that's something that I would have been looking into if I was to do this and I didn't want to use up any of my existing, or I didn't want to do any ugly wiring tapping into some of the existing wiring in the 79. So again, that's a reason why I really liked the way that I did it, was because it was a really clean setup, going directly into the factory wiring and using the factory fusing as well. So, but if you wanted to do a different way by using a a fuse pass-through, they're called, you can do it that way as well. And Explore Bound did an episode on that as well, if you wanted to check that out. So now, I had a lot of fun last night testing out the XRS unit with Dad. We were using all sorts of code names and various other things. We got a good laugh out of it. And one of the things that I really noticed was just how clear it comes through, both on here, but also how well it actually transmits to the handpiece, just the small 2-watter that he had. He ran in the house and used it for a bit. So it was actually surprising how clear it was, and you can tell that a good quality unit like this, it actually makes a big difference in the clarity of what is being received and also what is being sent as well. So that's something that I really appreciated, is that how good the quality was of it. And just by one person having one of these at least, it will make it a lot clearer and a lot easier to hear what is going on over the communications. Now, I must say, when it comes to mounting the actual handpiece for this, I was far too scared to drill or tape any particular spot for the handpiece. So I actually didn't end up doing it, because I actually have quite a nice little cubby spot for this to sit in anyway. So I'm probably going to use that for now until I get too annoyed on one of my camping trips, and I'll probably find a spot to mount it after, probably getting, like I said, probably a bit too annoyed with having to reach down all the time and pick it up to speak. So I think I'm just going to leave it in that nice little cubby. It fits perfectly in there anyway. So just in case you were wondering where did I end up mounting it, I was thinking of putting it right next to the aircon dials, but I feel like that's going to be too difficult to try to move those dials and might get in the way a little bit, just because it is quite a thick mounting point there. So that concludes today's video, guys, and I probably gave you far too much information, whether you wanted it or not. I don't know. I always feel like that these install videos have all been done before, and maybe having a little bit more of an insight as to why I picked this particular unit might actually help you guys out as well. And I spent a lot of time thinking about this install as well, so hopefully I was able to transfer some of that knowledge and information onto you guys, whether you want to do this sort of thing in your own vehicles, or if you just wanted to join me for a bit of a chat. I appreciate it very much. And guys, with that, I will see you next video. I would say next week, but I'm probably going to release a video sooner than that. So make sure you've subscribed, and I'll see you very shortly. See you then.